Similarly, the hacking of the DNC and Clinton campaign emails was already known to the public by the time Steele authored his dossier memo on the subject, and Russia was the prime suspect. There was never any evidence that the Trump campaign was a participant. Finally, Steele's contention of an 8-year-long relationship of intelligence sharing between the Trump team and the Kremlin defied common sense and logic. It was a silly claim that undermined the dossier as a whole. But the most comical assertion was that Page would pocket a 19% stake in one of Russia's most valuable assets, the state-controlled oil company Rosneft, in exchange for the prospect of lifting Western sanctions. In dollars, the payout would approximate $11 billion. It is absurd to think that Moscow would pay an enormous bribe to a volunteer junior unpaid advisor who had never met the candidate and had few real connections to the campaign. That, of course, did not stop Democrats like Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, of the House Intelligence Committee from advancing this screwball conspiracy during hearings on Capitol Hill. Page vigorously denied any involvement in such a plot. Despite his having been wiretapped by the FBI for more than a year, no incriminating evidence was ever found and no charges were ever brought against him. With their dossier, Simpson and Steele managed to victimize an innocent man. As will be discussed in a later chapter, Manafort was convicted of financial crimes that predated by many years his joining the Trump campaign. The charges had nothing whatsoever to do with Trump-Russia collusion, and no evidence was ever presented by prosecutors alleging a Kremlin conspiracy to throw the presidential election. Like Page, Manafort was never an intermediary working at the behest of Russia. A later iteration of the dossier claimed that Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen had met secretly in Prague with a Kremlin official to arrange cash payments and devise a cover-up operation. Had the FBI bothered to look, records showed that Cohen had been in Los Angeles and New York during the stated time frame. No documents placed him in Prague. During his congressional testimony in February 2019, Cohen stated under oath that he had never so much as visited the Czech Republic. There was nothing intelligent about the so-called intelligence document created by Steele and Simpson. With seed money from the Clinton campaign and Democrats, they composed a collection of fables designed to defame and discredit Trump and those associated with him. For a while, it seemed to work. The FBI eagerly appropriated the dossier and, without first verifying any of the claims, launched a dilating investigation of Trump that began in earnest on the same day Comey cleared Clinton. As the document gained currency in the FBI, Agent Peter Strzok boarded a plane at the end of July or early August and headed to London, from which the dossier had originated. Text messages he exchanged with his lover Page were redacted in key places by the FBI and DOJ, making it difficult to discern the identities of individuals with whom he met in the United Kingdom. But his visit appears to have been profitable in furthering the collusion hoax, since Strzok described a particular meeting as productive. A discussion took place with Page about how to conceal information from future Freedom of Information Act or FOIA requests in the event the trip became known. References in those emails make it clear that the CIA was involved and the White House is running this. But Strzok was operating in the shadows. Feeding the dossier to the Department of Justice. Steele and Simpson were not merely satisfied with dumping the dossier into the lap of the FBI. They wanted to ensure that it received a wider audience in U.S. law enforcement, inasmuch as the presidential election was fast approaching. Something had to be done about Trump. He was behind in the polls, but nothing could be left to chance. If the co-conspirators could trigger a criminal investigation of the candidate and leak the information to the press, Clinton's waltz to the White House would be all but assured. Steele flew to Washington, D.C. to meet with a high-ranking Justice Department official he had known for years, Bruce Orr. On July 30, 2016, at 9 a.m., the ex-British spy met at the Mayflower Hotel with Orr, who held the No. 4 position at DOJ as Associate Deputy Attorney General. Steele conveyed the contents of the dossier to him, but added that the FBI already had some of the memos in its possession. Of course it did. Steele had shared the documents with a Bureau agent on July 5th. This and other evidence clearly undermined the long-standing contention by Democratic Representative Adam Schiff that Steele's information did not reach the counterintelligence team investigating Russia at FBI headquarters until mid-September 2016. In truth, the FBI team had it in July and perhaps as early as June, when the first memo was written. Either Schiff knew that, or he was badly misinformed. Also attending the Mayflower Hotel meeting with Steele was Orr's wife. Not coincidentally, she had been hired months earlier by Simpson as a contractor for Fusion GPS. Her assignment was to develop anti-Trump research that could be used for the benefit of Fusion's clients, the Clinton campaign, and the DNC. In her private testimony before the House Judiciary Committee, Nellie Orr stated that her specific task was to develop evidence that might show how Trump and his family had engaged in illicit dealings with the Russians. She told Congress that she investigated Trump's children, Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump Jr., and even the candidate's wife, Melania Trump. Naturally, that was intended to help support the dossier. She admitted that her political views had influenced her decision to target Trump because I favored Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate. Just how much anti-Trump information Nellie Orr shared with her husband is unclear, because she refused to answer many key questions by invoking the spousal privilege that protects one spouse from being incriminated by the testimony of the other. When Bruce Orr appeared behind closed doors for his testimony, he insisted that he had never read the opposition research his wife had prepared against Trump. He also stated that he had not read any of the documents that Steele had given him. Instead, he said, he had decided to hand them over to the FBI without examining their contents. Hard to believe, but that's what he stated. There is now substantial evidence that Nellie Orr provided false testimony when she appeared before the two House committees conducting a joint investigation. Under questioning, she insisted that she had shared her research only with Fusion GPS, Steele, and her husband. This was not true. 339 pages of emails show she sent it to at least 3 other prosecutors at the Justice Department. Those same emails prove that she was well aware of the DOJ's Russia investigation, even though she claimed otherwise when she testified. A criminal referral on Nellie Orr was promptly sent to the Justice Department. While Nellie Orr was working behind the scenes to discredit and damage Trump, her husband at the DOJ continued to serve as a conduit between Steele, Simpson, and the FBI to feed the dossier beast. He would later deliver to the Bureau 2 USB flash drives or memory sticks containing derogatory information about Trump, including the dossier that had been given to him separately by his wife and Simpson. Orr's cloak and dagger role as a covert intermediary is curious if not suspect, since Steele had already met with FBI agent Gaeta in London 3 weeks earlier and had been on the FBI's payroll as a confidential human resource, or CHR, since at least February 2016. Steele wasn't working for just one client. He was working for 3. He was collecting money from the FBI, the DNC, and the Clinton campaign. He and his benefactors, who funneled the cash through Simpson's Fusion GPS, all had a concomitant interest: trashing Trump. Whether Orr knew it or not, he was being manipulated by Simpson and Steele with unverified and phony information. Predictably, Orr contacted a top official at the FBI immediately following the breakfast meeting with Steele. The desired result was achieved. The very next day, July 31, 2016, the Bureau executed papers to formally launch its investigation of Trump, nicknamed Crossfire Hurricane, a description not nearly as benign as Clinton's mid-year exam. Not surprisingly, it was the Trump-hating FBI agent Peter Strzok who signed the documents that would metastasize into a full-blown campaign to harass and torment Trump for the better part of the next 3 years. It was an unprecedented action. A presidential administration had launched a counterintelligence operation against the campaign of a candidate from the opposing party. Orr never advised his superiors about his many actions in feeding the FBI the anti-Trump material, nor his clandestine meeting with Steele and others of the rendezvous that followed. Instead, shortly after the July 30th debriefing by Steele on the dossier, Orr convened a meeting with FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and the FBI lawyer who worked for him directly, Lisa Page. Their get-together occurred in McCabe's office. No one seems to remember the exact date, although given the urgency that Orr said he had felt, it appears to have happened directly following the July 30th breakfast with Steele. After detailing the dossier, Orr testified that he had specifically warned McCabe and Page that the information in the document was highly dubious and driven by a biased author who despised Trump. Orr also advised that it had been commissioned by Fusion GPS, where his wife worked, because I wanted the FBI to be aware of any possible bias. Question: do you recall whether it was to you that Chris Steele said he was desperate that Donald Trump not win? Or, I think I said that to the FBI, yes. I don't recall the exact words. I definitely had a very strong impression that he did not want Donald Trump to win. Later in his testimony, Orr reiterated all of the warnings he had given to the FBI that Steele might not be a trustworthy source, and that the information in his dossier might be unreliable, if not bogus. Orr: when I spoke with the FBI, I told them my wife was working for Fusion GPS. I told them Fusion GPS was doing research on Donald Trump. I told them this is the information I had gotten from Chris Steele. I told them that Steele was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected. So those are all facts that I provided the FBI. When questioned later by the FBI investigators, Orr was even more emphatic about Steele's flagrant bias. Official Bureau files note that Steele had stated he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. Orr insisted that he repeated that warning to the FBI on more than one occasion. He pointedly informed it that Trump's political rival, the Clinton campaign, was financially underwriting the dossier, which would call into question its veracity because the campaign had a motive to distort or fabricate in order to damage its opponent. In his congressional testimony, Orr insisted that he had cautioned the FBI. These guys were hired by somebody who's related to the Clinton campaign, and be aware. The funding wasn't merely related to the campaign, it was the campaign, along with the Democratic National Committee. The testimony of Orr disproved another story that Representative Schiff kept selling to the American public, that Orr had never told the FBI anything about Steele's dossier until after the presidential election in late November. That was utterly untrue, and Schiff surely knew it. Orr, McCabe, and Page all confirmed the July 30th meeting and the dossier discussion. FBI records attested to it. Those records also corroborate all the warnings issued by Orr. Either Schiff didn't care to do his homework, or, more likely, he sought to misrepresent the facts. Many in the media uncritically accepted Schiff's version and propagated it as truth. It was not. More meetings, more warnings. Given Steele's acute bias and motivation to lie, given that his dossier seemed preposterous on its face and was completely unverified, and given that it was financed by the Clinton campaign and Democrats, the FBI should have approached the dossier with trepidation. Members of the intelligence community specializing in Russian affairs should have vetted the information, verifying what could be true. After all, it's not possible that freelancers could have uncovered a conspiracy of that scale that U.S. intelligence had not also run across. That failure may be the most important clue in how the mass delusion spread. A key part of any conspiracy theory is that what the public can see must be the tip of the iceberg. From reporters to pundits to the average voter, anyone who bought into the scam believed that the FBI wouldn't have started all of it without having more than rumors to go on. That was one point that, until the Mueller report dropped, both sides could agree on. It would be unprecedented, horrifying, and borderline insane for the FBI to have pushed the investigation for 2 years based on nothing at all. But the opposite happened. Armed with a dossier, the FBI used it as a pretext to pursue Trump relentlessly. Credible and verified evidence didn't seem to matter. As Steele and Simpson continued to push their inflammatory dossier, Orr decided to disseminate it to others within the FBI and Justice Department. I subsequently met with Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and eventually Joe Pientka at the FBI, said Orr. Although he concealed from his superiors at the DOJ the fact that he was secretly acting as a conduit between Steele and the FBI, Orr also elected to give the improbable intelligence to 3 prosecutors at the Justice Department in yet another meeting. That occurred within a few days of the FBI formally opening the Trump-Russia investigation on July 31st. Orr's surprising admission came in the middle of his congressional testimony when he mentioned, almost as an aside, "I also provided this information to people in the criminal division, specifically Bruce Swartz, Zainab Ahmad, and Andrew Weissman." 2 of those individuals, Ahmad and Weissman, were later hired by Robert Mueller to be part of his assembled team of special counsel prosecutors that escalated the investigation of Trump beyond the FBI and DOJ. They were also informed that the Clinton campaign and Democrats had paid for the Steele dossier through the company Fusion GPS and its founder Glenn Simpson, who also employed Orr's wife. Here is Orr's testimony. Question: so the record is clear. What the Department of Justice and the FBI was aware of Was your relationship with Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson, your wife's relationship with Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson, Mr. Steele's bias against Donald Trump, Mr. Simpson's bias against Donald Trump, your wife's compensation for work for Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS, correct? Discussion off the record. Or, right. They were also made aware that the Clinton campaign and the DNC had paid for the phony Russian information, or disinformation, that was intended to influence the election. Yet, instead of investigating Clinton and her Confederates for conspiring with foreigners to defraud the U.S. government, the FBI used the Clinton-Russian dossier to target Trump, despite a dearth of evidence that it was authentic. Thus, 4 members of Mueller's special counsel team, Weissman, Ahmad, Strzok, and Page, all knew as early as August 2016, when the investigation of Trump was initiated by the FBI, that it was riven with prejudice and driven by a defective document. They deliberately disregarded the source of Steele's funding and sought to exploit his dossier. Amazingly, Orr was peddling the uncorroborated Steele document while benefiting from it financially. Since his wife was working on the anti-Trump opposition research documents, she was being paid by Fusion GPS, which was being subsidized by the Clinton campaign and Democrats. That money was being deposited into the Orr's joint bank account at the same time Bruce Orr was using his position at the DOJ to advance the false intelligence document. That created a disqualifying conflict of interest for Orr. He was legally obligated under Justice Department regulations to recuse himself from any investigation in which his wife was involved. Orr did not seek a waiver of that conflict. Instead, he omitted the information on all relevant forms and continued to act as the conduit. Upon joining the DOJ, he had signed an agreement stating that he would be fired if he violated its rules. Inexplicably, he was not terminated, which only reinforces the impression that impropriety and concealment continued at the highest levels of the department. Not only did Orr fail to disclose that Fusion GPS was paying his wife, but it appears he did not fully report the nature of the work performed in financial disclosure reports as required under regulations. Willfully filing a false government report constitutes a crime under federal law, specifically 8 U.S.C. Section 1001. It is also against the law to use a public office for personal financial gain. This runs afoul of the federal bribery and gratuity statutes, as well as the Honest Services Fraud Statute. Yet there appears to have been no known investigation of Orr by the Justice Department, where he is still employed, although he was demoted when his advocacy in the dossier fiasco was made public. Amazingly, he was awarded a $28,000 performance bonus while the Russia probe was ongoing, according to DOJ records. Perhaps motivated by money, Orr moved aggressively in his role as facilitator. He agreed to meet in person with Glenn Simpson on August 22, 2016. At that point, the FBI's investigation was not even a month old. Simpson pretended to be confident that Steele's document was authentic and reliable, even though he had provided not a shred of proof or corroboration. He vouched for the credibility of Steele, not knowing that the former spy had been admonished by the FBI months earlier for reasons the Bureau has consistently refused to disclose. Steele would soon be fired by the FBI for leaking to the media and lying about it. He was declared not suitable for use as a CHS, or confidential human source. His FBI handler advised that Steele should henceforth not operate to obtain any intelligence whatsoever on behalf of the FBI. Steele had proven to be deceitful and hence radioactive to the Bureau. Despite that, the FBI kept going back to Steele even after he was fired. Also, even as the FBI was leaking like a sieve over the dossier, somehow Steele's standing within the organization failed to leak. During the August 22nd meeting, Orr listened as Simpson wove a tall tale of how Paul Manafort and Carter Page must be Russian assets engaged in an illicit scheme to rig the election. He couldn't prove it, but the dots were there. All the FBI had to do was connect them. Simpson implored Orr to pressure the FBI into taking swift action against Trump. If nothing else, the candidate was somehow guilty by association. Of what exactly was left unstated. When Simpson testified before the House Intelligence Committee in November 2017, he denied that he had ever met with Orr before the election. Question: You've never heard from anyone in the U.S. government in relation to those matters, the dossier, either the FBI or the Department of Justice? Simpson: After the election. I mean, During the election, no. Simpson's testimony was inaccurate and untruthful. Orr's testimony and his notes, including an email on the date of their liaison, August 22nd, show that he had met with Simpson more than 2 months prior to the election. Either the Fusion GPS founder forgot about such an important meeting, during which he had disclosed the dossier's contents, or he lied. That may further explain why Simpson subsequently invoked the Fifth Amendment when asked to appear again before Congress to explain his deceptive account of interactions with Orr. That was not the only instance in which Simpson is believed to have given false testimony. Senator Charles Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, recited another statement that Grassley described as extremely misleading if not an outright lie. Citing the actions of Simpson, Fusion GPS, and Steele, Grassley and Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, sent a criminal referral to the Justice Department on January 4, 2018, demanding a comprehensive investigation into the apparent lies. The standard here seems to be that false testimony related to Russia is a crime and a scandal when a Trump supporter does it, but not when anyone else does.